LiSTNR production.
In the world of policing, general duties police are the backbone of the force. These are the men and women who generally serve 3 to 5 years on the streets before they turn their attention to a more focused role in policing, forensics, becoming a detective, or working in highway patrol. In today's episode, we sit down with Justyn Backhouse, a man who spent 25 years serving on the front line of New South Wales Police. From high-speed pursuits with highway patrol to complex rescues with aviation command, Justyn lived and worked at the sharpest end of law enforcement.
The right side propeller detached from the engine and flew away from the aircraft.
But there's another side to that life, one not often seen in the headlines. A life of adrenaline, yes, but also trauma.
Like things that I used to enjoy, I struggle with now. Hearing a helicopter would rattle me. It would really rattle me. And that was crazy because I lived and breathed them for years at work.
In 2021, Justyn was diagnosed with PTSD, and in the quiet that followed the sirens, he began to write. The result is Hidden Scars, From Crime Scenes to Crisis, The Price of Service, a raw and compelling memoir about the invisible wounds carried by first responders. I'm former police officer Brent Sanders, and for the past 25 years, I've dedicated myself to sharing what I've learnt on the force to the Australian public, so they can better protect themselves from falling victim to crime. So with the help of some of the most respected current and former detectives and high-ranking law enforcement agents, we're going to pull back the curtain on what life is like on the force and what they've learned about how crime and criminals really work. These are real stories from real detectives. Justyn, August 2007, Sydney hosted the APEC conference, which was attended by leaders from 21 Pacific nations. As a member of the helicopter police, Polair, you were quite heavily involved in that. Can you just discuss your involvement in APEC back in 2007?
Yeah, so the actual APEC event, and it's held annually in a different host nation. Meetings started in Australia earlier in the year, and then the leaders' event around that August-September period is 1 week. That's obviously when all the international leaders come out. Our involvement was really what we call top cover, which is an observation platform from the air supporting the police on the ground. So when you think about dignitaries and protected people, they are obviously, there's a lot of security around them. Members of the public might see a motorcade fly through and a green light corridor, and they see 5 or 10 cars with lights. That's a very highly choreographed event. It's run in New South Wales by the police dignitary protection team, and so they have point, they coordinate all the movements. When we're just a supporting force, Polair aircraft would be overhead, scouting ahead, making sure the route's clear. There's no risks, there's no safety risks, there's no traffic. And also being in a position to respond. So we would use our camera, we'd be downlinking that image so that the police coordinating the movement can see real time what's happening from the air.
For something like APEC, how many choppers would they have at any one time? Is this the one in the air, or do you have different roles, different crew?
At the time, we had 5 helicopters, and then there could be 2 or 3 on a movement, depending on the, I guess, the risk or the rating of that movement. You could have a forward platform that's looking ahead as sort of a recon. You could have another platform with tactical police on board, ready to respond if need be. They could be put in. A tactical team could be put in at short notice. So there could be a couple of aircraft working in concert with each other. Overhead.
And mate, so you've got how many crew on board one of those choppers? Because they're not huge. What do you got? 4, 3 on board?
We normally had 1 pilot and 2 TFOs, a tactical flight officer. The TFOs are police officers, and they basically conduct the police mission. They use technical equipment, and they bring all their experience to bear to coordinate with the police on the ground. And obviously, the pilot gets us in the position we need to be to do that job.
Yeah, those pilots. So they're not sworn police per se, but they would have come across from military or civilian sort of roles and that type of thing.
When I was there, and I've been gone a few years, but the pilots were all special constables. And what that means is they come in from civilian or military backgrounds. They're all highly experienced. They come in, they do a special constable course at the academy, which is, it might be 6 or 12 weeks. It's basically an introduction to police procedures, how the police organisation works. They do weapons training because they do carry firearms as we did. And while they don't have the full arrest powers that police have, they are authorised to carry firearms. They're authorised to support us, and so they have to go through that process.
With APEC, so something like that, or visiting dignitaries, PolAir is used primarily when they're moving from one location to another. So I imagine in the cockpit there, you've got eyes up and you're communicating with someone on the ground. Is that sort of how that works?
That's exactly right. And one of the reasons we have 2 police TFOs is they have distinct roles. And the officer in the front is coordinating with the ground. He's not only navigating to the job and assisting the pilot being where he needs to be in terms of the position, he's talking using the police radio to communicate to police on the ground and coordinate that. Now, the officer in the back is a technical specialist on the camera, and they have a 360-degree gimbal camera, day-night FLIR camera, and he's operating the camera and he's looking at whatever we need to look at. So we'd be taking some direction from the coordinators of the movement, and if they want to look at a particular building or a group of people or cars or whatever their request is, we can do that, and they can get an instant look. So it really gives them it's a bird's eye view.
In all the interviews that we've done, Justyn, you're the first person that's been up in the police helicopter. So I'm really interested to just have a bit of a chat about that. Firstly, from you personally, what is it that drew you towards PolAir, and what's that transition like from, for you, highway patrol across?
Every officer that joins the New South Wales Police has to do about 3 years in general duties first, and that gives you a good grounding and introduction to the police and basically frontline operations. After that, I went into highway patrol. I specialised there for a little while and then moved into PolAir. I was always interested in flying. I think from a young age, I remember going to air shows with my dad and looking at planes and helicopters, and there were moments from my childhood where I just thought it was a really cool thing. I was interested in aviation. So when the opportunity came up, I put my hat in the ring, and I was very fortunate to be selected.
And just tell me a little bit about that. You step across, you start training, and what does that training entail? How long does that take?
Yeah, so once I'd passed all the assessment process and came on board, we basically started with what's called ground school, and it's basically classroom theory. So we look at subjects such as look at some meteorology, because we're flying in weather, looking at navigation in terms of how to get around the city, streets and suburbs, and what to look for, how the aircraft works, so some aerodynamics, some basic operations, so we understand we really need to appreciate the job that the pilot has and be aware of that, and some air procedures such as working around airports with other aircraft, safety-related stuff. And then after the theory, we would go into flying, where we would do flight assessments, navigating to streets or suburbs or locations of interest, using the camera, using the night sun at night, other technical things on board the aircraft. Then we did helicopter underwater escape training, where we would be in a dunker and have to simulate a ditching of an aircraft in water, have to get out of the airframe and escape the aircraft, and some other external courses. So,
I mean, I've read through your book. We'll chat about a little bit about that, Justyn. That underwater stuff was not one of your favourite activities?
No, I didn't love it. A lot of people didn't love it. A few did, but absolutely necessary. It gave me a new appreciation. You know, if you ever found yourself having to do a ditching, having an emergency over water, you definitely would want that experience behind you. Very disorienting. Once the aircraft inverts, sinks into the water, gets dark, it would be very easy to get stuck in the aircraft if you didn't have that experience.
And you do that training blindfolded too, I think.
That's right, yeah.
And I think if I remember rightly, in the book you mentioned in one of your early attempts, you were thrashing through the water frantically to get out, but you're actually heading to the bottom of the pool, not the top. Yeah, that's right.
So it was conducted in a swimming pool, and we had safety divers, so that was fine. But I was disoriented. We spun upside down. I had black arc goggles on, so I couldn't see which way was up, and I swam out and just went the wrong way. It happens, but you get used to it eventually.
Now, when you're flying in a chopper, you've got the pilot, as you've said. That's his role. But if we get onto a commercial airline, there's a co-pilot, and if anything happens to the pilot, the co-pilot takes over. If, touchwood, something was to happen to your pilot and you're in the air, are you taught the skills of how to bring that helicopter to ground?
Most of our helicopters at the time only had one set of controls with the pilot. So on my side, on the left side of the helicopter, I didn't have flight controls. So if the pilot was incapacitated, that would have been the end of it for us, pretty much. Some of the new aircraft that they have now, the larger helicopters do, and they do have dual controls, but the crew, as far as I'm aware, are not trained to use those controls. Some agencies overseas do some training, but it's quite challenging. Helicopters are inherently unstable. They're quite difficult to fly. And so it's one of those things that if you were going to train for it, you'd have to do quite a comprehensive course. And I don't believe to date that they're not doing it there at the moment. So,
how long a period is it before you are classified as a TFO, Tactical Flight Officer?
It was probably 3 or 4 months. And then in saying that was trained to the standard that I needed for APEC. I was not trained to operate a winch and do rescues and that at that stage. That came later. So the training very much was ongoing there. And there's a whole bunch of specialties such as working with tactical police, fast roping, winching, pulling divers into the water that come way down the track. But for all intents, for what I needed for that period, it was 3 or 4 months.
I spoke to someone just recently who, I think at 2 a.m. or something, was awoken by the police chopper going backwards and forwards over their part of the street. And when they pulled the curtains back, they said the street was lit up. It was like a massive big spotlight. Can you explain that to us?
Yeah, what they're probably looking at is the night sun, which is a very bright light, 1 million candle power light, which is operated. It's on the belly of the aircraft. It's operated on a little control. There's a joystick, and basically you can steer that light wherever you want on the ground. So we would often use that to illuminate scenes for police. If they had a car stopped and they were in a dark area, or perhaps if they're looking for someone, so you can zoom the beam in and out like a torch. It's like a giant torch, and you can move it around on the ground using the controller. So that's something that we would use.
And I'm assuming also that it could be used for stolen vehicles, offender decamps, or the dogs looking for somebody, or a burglar that's found on premises takes off, or something along those lines.
It can be, yeah. And also we have the camera, the FLIR camera, which is an infrared camera at night, which allows us to see in the night, basically working on heat, body heat, and heat differential. So it's a black and white image. Combination of those two, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
When you start your shift, that 10-hour shift, it's not like you're going to be up in the air for 10 hours. Or how does that work? What does a typical shift look like?
Yeah, so the first thing that we would do at the start of the shift is any aircraft that's going to fly needs to be pre-flighted. Now, pre-flight inspection is carried out by the pilots, the mechanical aspects of the aircraft. They climb up on the aircraft, check the blades, check the oil levels, all the hatches, everything's secure. And we as crew would have a number of things to do. We would take a fuel drain, test the fuel for quality and water and any contaminants, fire up the systems on board and check all our computer systems and camera and make sure everything's working fine. So when everything's all done and signed off, that's the first thing we do in the morning. And that could take up to an hour if we have 3 or 4 aircraft to do. Once the aircraft is signed off and we're operational, the aircraft would get moved out of the hangar on a platform. It gets towed out to the landing pads where they operate from. And after that, it's a matter of getting our own personal equipment ready. You would have your helmet, your vest with your inflatable vest with your emergency breathing system, which is a little air canister. We have a harness and all our gear that we have to carry with us out to the aircraft. So you get all that set up and then you're ready to go for the day.
Would I be right in saying, Justyn, that there'd be other jobs that come in where you maybe have to go somewhere like looking at cannabis crops or doing that type of thing, and which is not a job happening per se, but you're used in a capacity to look at that? Yeah,
planned tasks. So as you say, there's jobs we would be up doing high visibility patrol, and we'd respond on the radio like a police car would to jobs happening real time. But also we had planned tasks, and some of them could be in Sydney, supporting people. It could be a high-risk warrant being executed or a public order like a protest, or it could be a cannabis eradication trip in the country. That's an operation that we would conduct with the drug squad, and we'd go away for a week, take an aircraft and a team and support them remotely in terms of locating cannabis plantations and removing the plant of cannabis and getting their operators in and out of the scene.
You mentioned earlier that you can go on and do some additional or specific training. Can you just give us an insight into what you yourself did in that area?
Yeah, so there's a number of areas. In terms of the breadth of jobs or taskings that poly could be used, it's anything you can think of. There's stuff like being overhead pursuits, and so that's very dynamic, very fast, high speed, using camera to coordinate things there. We work with police divers, and we trained in deploying them into the water, so having them on board the aircraft, having them all kitted up, a low hover over the water, and they go into the water. Tactical police, we trained with them with fast roping, where we would have thick nylon ropes on the side of the aircraft, and they'd have a team, and they would deploy down the ropes to get into a spot. They're training for a situation where ground access might be difficult, or you might want to go on top of a building or a vessel in the harbour or something like that sort of thing. Winching, rescue, a lot of that sort of work, and deceased recoveries on the coast in difficult to access locations. So talking about winching in police rescue.
You were in poly for quite some years. Did you become trained in all of those specific specialty areas?
Yeah, most of them, yeah. There's a number of areas. I've forgotten most of them, but quite a few of them, yeah.
Justyn, December 2011, you're involved in the hunt for fugitive Malcolm Naden. Now, he's a rapist, murderer, been on the run for almost 7 years. He was, I'd say, probably the most wanted man in the country at that time. Can you discuss your involvement in tracking down Malcolm Naden?
Yeah, Malcolm Naden had been on the run from New South Wales Police for a number of years, as you say, and they'd had information that he was bouncing around the state. He was well and truly off grid, living in the bush, away from population centres and towns. Late 2011, I believe they had some information that they thought he might have been around the Nowandock or Gloucester area, so up above Hunter Valley up there. Nowandock itself is quite a small town. It's surrounded by national parks on all sides, and we're talking about thick, wooded, very dense bushland, hard to access, hard to see into, and so helicopter was invaluable to visit sites and to search areas. So that was how our involvement came about. I flew up on Christmas Day 2011. That was the start of my first rotation up there. I did a week up there initially and then came back. And so our daily taskings were to fly tactical police mostly into areas where there were huts and cabins and off-grid properties, and just to search for him, because they became aware he was hiding in the bush, but he was also, there were reports of thefts from these dwellings, and so they became aware that he was breaking into little huts, stealing food supplies and also firearms, as it turned out, and other items, and then he was going back into the bush. So it was a matter of trying to access these properties as efficiently and quickly as we could.
Were you working the day that they located him?
No, I wasn't. I was back in Sydney then. That was March 2012, I think.
I think he admitted the rapes and homicides, and in fact was taken back to a location by police to identify where he may have buried one or two of the deceased. You were involved in that part of the Naden case as well. Yeah,
so that was about 3 weeks after he was arrested and moved to Goulburn Jail. He was then taken out under armed corrective services and driven up to Dubbo. The idea was that police believed that he had disposed of the bodies of one of his victims around a river area just outside Dubbo. We were overhead watching and just making sure the area was secure. Came within 20 metres of him as he got out of the truck, and he walked past me, and I just remember looking at him, and it was a bit surreal after all that time. I believe later on down the track they did locate, and it might have been later that year that they found the remains of one of his victims, sadly, in that river area. But yeah, that was my final involvement with him.
At the time that Naden was caught, the dog squad were there as well. You've probably got armed police, you've got tactical operations unit, but hovering above all of that, of course, is Paul Eyre and utilising that situation. He had said to police, I had the pleasure of interviewing Ricky Hennessy, the lead detective on that case a couple of years ago, and he had made it very clear to police that if he escaped, they would never catch him again. So he was at extremely high risk.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. Justyn, I want to have a chat to you about a situation you're involved with, and this certainly, when I read it, I was quite surprised to hear it was 2017. It seemed like it was about a year ago. Particularly, a lot of our Sydney listeners will remember this. March 2017, a regional airlines flight flew from Albury to Sydney. The flight suffered a catastrophic mechanical failure over densely populated South Sydney. I think a propeller or something came off. But can you sort of fill in the gaps for us there and what your involvement was?
There was 16 passengers and 3 crew on board, and they were about 10 nautical miles out of Sydney Airport, so they're on their descent coming through 5,000 or 6,000 feet. They had some indications of mechanical warnings in the cockpit, and then shortly after that they had a catastrophic failure. The right side propeller detached from the engine and flew away from the aircraft. So it actually just spun away and fell below the aircraft. Now, they were obviously able to land safely without further issue. But a few days later, we became aware of this propeller, this missing part that needed to be found, as the ATSB were going to conduct an investigation on the incident, of course, and they really needed to find this part. And no one knew where it was. There'd been no calls from any members of the public or anything saying, hey, we've seen this thing come down. And obviously from the altitude they were at, and it spun off, they lost sight of it pretty well instantly, and it could have landed anywhere, really. So we were tasked, we were given some instructions and tasking through the ATSB, and they estimated a search area. It was still a large area around the Georges River. To the north and the south of the river, there was areas of bush and suburbia where we had to search. So we just started out, planned a systematic search down low, very low level, because of the dense bush, we needed to be very low because we thought it could very well have fallen under foliage. I was beginning to lose hope, quite frankly. I thought, well, this might have fallen in the river. We're never going to find it again. It's gone forever. We were hovering really low over a section of bush near probably 100 metres from a row of houses. And my offsider, who was sitting behind me in the aircraft, yells out, I found it. And so we were, what? So I looked down, and if I look down my left-hand window, we were only a matter of 50 feet above the trees. As the rotor wash was spreading the foliage, like spreading the tree branches, I could look down. I saw this propeller sitting on the ground upright, this big 4-bladed propeller. It's 3 or 4 metres in diameter. It's a big, chunky piece of metal. Took some photos, marked the position, and then we set about trying to walk some police in from the ground to secure that as a crime scene.
That is a populated area of Sydney. Flights coming in sort of low as they prepare to land at Sydney Airport. I mean, you if you're a betting man, you'd almost say the odds are that that's going to land in a house, it's going to land in a populated area as opposed to the bush. That's yeah.
We got lucky, and we really got lucky finding it. It was a very long job and search, and we all of us had almost given up hope. So it was really good. Somehow it landed in this position, only 50, 100 metres from a row of houses, in really the last large pocket of bush before Sydney Airport. So had it have come off a little while later, there's every chance it might have landed in a street or a yard or a house.
And what was the outcome of that? It was just purely a mechanical fault. There was no human fault or anything there? Or?
Oh, there's no human fault. I believe, I mean, there's an ATSB report on the internet, but I believe there was a mechanical failure. It basically sheared off, I think, and came off the aircraft. And it's a really unusual thing to happen. I think there'd been one happen in the US, but it obviously doesn't happen very often.
Coming up, things begin to change for Justyn. The next chapter in his life is about courage, collapse, and ultimately healing. You started to experience what you've described as mental health decline, and this began late 2019. You were formally diagnosed with post-traumatic stress in 2021, which led to you leaving the job in 2022. If you're comfortable, Justyn, can you talk to us just a little about your experience through that time?
It really crept up on me, and I didn't realise what was happening at the time. Throughout my career, I'd been involved in a lot of jobs and seen a lot of trauma, been to a lot of road trauma, fatal crashes earlier on, deceased people and that sort of thing. And especially back in the 90s, early 2000s, the idea was you just got on with it. You got on with it, you got back to work. There was not much attention back in those days paid to mental health in terms of policing, I believe. So we just went and drank and got back the next day. I think over time, some of the jobs, like some of the traumas collected in my head, and I thought I'd dealt with them, but I hadn't. So, 2019, I started to. I was following a pretty traumatic event which involved me witnessing a suicide, and there was another job at the time, and around that time, I started to suffer some symptoms, some panic attacks. I started getting panic attacks at work, which was new to me. I'd never had one before, and I honestly thought I was having a heart attack the first time. It was horrible, really scary. I started getting nightmares, and I'd feel nauseous before work. I'd just feel sick, and I was physically sick some days, and some days I just couldn't go to work. This kept building and building. But I just thought I was stressed. I thought, just having a rough trot. That was a difficult job I did the other day. Not really paying too much attention to it, but knowing that I wasn't 100%, didn't realise it was actually PTSD until way after. It was building and it was really getting in the way of my work. I would have these attacks at work and just be so overwhelmed with fear and images and thinking about things in my head of jobs and traumas and deaths and stuff. Yeah, it took a toll. Eventually I couldn't go any longer, and I went to see my GP, and I unravelled, and I think that was the tipping point, really. But it was also the time at which I had to put up my hand and say, I can't do this job anymore. That was really hard. My GP looked at me, and after I'd spoken to him, he said, "You can't go back to work. You're not well." And I had to ring up work, and I had to have a conversation with a boss there and say, "Hey, this has happened. I need some time off." I thought initially it would be a few weeks or a month or a couple of months, and I'd be able to get through it. It ended up being a lot longer than that. I didn't realise how badly I was injured, and I actually didn't return to the workplace. Going through therapy with my psychologist and my doctors and stuff, and I was medically discharged the following year in 2022. So, and I never returned to the workplace. It's like I was there one day and then I just left and never went back. I'd never planned it. It just happened. I wanted to go back. A part of me missed my friends. I missed my workmates, and I felt a lot of shame for not being able to go back in the workplace and keep doing the job with them. I mean, my mates were still there, and I felt like I'd dropped the ball. I felt really bad about that, but I also was really scared of it, not knowing what sort of job I'd be confronted with or how I'd react. Everyone says to me, "Oh, Poly is such a great job." It is a great job. I loved it. Had a great time. They worked with amazing, talented people, but also you are exposed to a lot that people don't see. It's not about flying down the harbour on a sunny day. It's about picking up deceased people, lots of them, searching for missing people. Some of them you don't find.
I've heard it described, Justyn, as like a bucket with water dripping into it. You don't even notice until the bucket's sort of almost at the point of overflowing, and then it becomes all consuming. This very much sounds like how you experience things.
Yeah, I think so. It definitely crept up on me. When I was a young cop, when I started in the job, I thought I was bulletproof and 10 feet tall, and I thought, I'll be fine. And we never thought about that sort of thing. There was occasionally there was people who went off on sick leave at work, but you didn't think about it. You were just going from one shift to the next, one job to the next job. It was a ride. It was an adventure. Loved it. I loved policing. I loved, all of it. And then as you go along, these things just stick with you. I've still got a lot of symptoms, and I struggle with anxiety really, really quite badly. And I'm not like, things trigger me, like large, busy places, like a lot of people, noisy things. I couldn't go to a rock concert or something. Like things that I used to enjoy, I struggle with now. Hearing a helicopter would rattle me. It would really rattle me. And that was crazy because I lived and breathed them for years at work. It's really affected my life, and it also, it makes you scared, but it makes you angry as well. And I never used to be an angry person, but it's certainly affected my personality, and it's affected the way I react to situations, my reactivity, and takes over your whole life.
2019, Justyn, when you sort of put your hand up and you yourself said, okay, there's something not right here, I need some help. Did you get the support that you think that you're entitled to from the department, or did you have to walk that path on your own?
I went to my GP and sort of nothing came of it. And then I used the police employee assistance EAP program, which is it's a contracted third-party support system. So you ring a 1-800 number and they connect you with psychologists. I went along to one of them. I had 2 or 3 sessions, but I didn't know what was wrong with me, and I don't think I described it well. And I really didn't even think it was trauma-related. So I probably didn't even understand what trauma was and what I needed. And so this lady, she was a psychologist, and that's fine. But I came out of it after a couple of sessions thinking I didn't feel any better, and it wasn't really addressing what was going on with me. So I stopped going. And that's when I just tried to knuckle down with work and just put it behind me. But yeah, symptoms just got worse and worse.
As much as they perhaps have, worked on this, it's still not an environment conducive to young men or young women putting their hand up and saying, hey, I'm struggling here. I mean, if you bust your shoulder on a job or you break your leg, everyone's like, oh, mate, if you've got some issues which are not visible, they're mental health issues, is there still a stigma attached to that, or there was at the time?
I believe so. It's probably better now than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, but I believe there is, and I think there's a belief with a lot of police that if they put their hands up, they're going to end their career. Now, I waited too long. Honestly, I thought I could just move past it, and I just was stubborn, and I thought, no, I'm not going to. I was afraid of what people would say, how it would affect my career. I loved being at Poly, or I loved what I did, and I waited too long. If there's one piece of advice I would offer to people who may be in a similar situation, maybe struggling, is get help early. Put your hand up. Be honest with yourself. Go see someone, talk to them. And it might be a simple tune-up and get some sessions and some strategies in place, and then you can go back to work. For a lot of people, that might be a reality.
Like any medical condition, whatever it is, if you've got a crooked knee or whatever, the longer you leave it, the worse it gets, and the longer it takes for it to come good.
Yeah, I'm a lot better now than I was, but I still have symptoms, and I struggle with things daily. And I think for a lot of people with PTSD, from what I hear, it's about managing symptoms, and it's about getting strategies in place to calm yourself. For a lot of people, it never really goes away, and there is a lot of people out there. A lot of people I talk to people through the book and through my social media. I've been able to talk to a lot of former and current first responders and other people in the community, and who've reached out to me, and I know there's a lot of this out there. So, yeah.
You mentioned, Justyn, briefly your family. This is a tough thing for a family to be part of and to observe for loved ones, children. You have.
Yeah, I've got 2 children.
It's tough for them to see Dad going through that too, I would imagine.
It really is, and that's my biggest regret, I think, and my biggest shame is that my children have had to see me at my worst. They've had to see me terrified, scared, reactive, overwhelmed, not able to think. I hate that. I hate that they've seen that. I'm trying to be at my best now. So,
and tough for your partner.
Yeah, tough for her. Because of them, because of my wife and my kids, I am here today, and they are what keeps me going. They're my biggest support.
Could I just ask, as a result of your experience, the advice that you would offer first responders, or indeed their friends and family members? Just any pieces of advice, having lived through this yourself?
The first thing is I would look at mental health proactively. And what I mean by that is, you train in a gym, police, firefighters, etc. You train physically to be strong enough to do the job. You need to train your mind and train our mind through ensuring that we get good sleep, good nutrition. We spend time outdoors, connect with people both in and outside of the job. It's very important to have social connections outside of a workplace like policing. Gives you perspective, keeps you balanced. You're not always talking shop, as police tend to do. Have hobbies and interests, and whether it's you meditate, you do yoga, or you go for a bushwalk, or you play with your dog in the park, it doesn't matter. Having interests in things outside work is key, and building up support networks, close friends, trusted people, family members. So when things do start to go awry, you can talk to people. And being in tune with yourself, knowing when you're not at your best. Some other things I've employed when I'm panicked and anxious, I use box breathing, which is basically a system of breathing. It calms the breathing down. So it's breathe in for 4 seconds, hold the breath for 4 seconds, breathe out slowly for 4 seconds, and then rest for 4 seconds. And continuing that slows your breathing, slows your heart rate. And I've seen in myself a change where I stop the spiral. It brings me down. It calms me. That's just one technique that I employ sometimes when I'm becoming panicked about something.
Is this something that should be spoken about at the early stage at the police academy? You mentioned it yourself. You go into the academy, 19, 20, you're 9 foot tall, you're bulletproof. You never think you're going to... Is this something that needs to be incorporated into into early training?
I don't know what is discussed now, but certainly when I went through the academy, it wasn't. I think absolutely well-being, holistically, well-being and health of your members is critical, and it should be discussed at the academy. It should be discussed at the station. People need to feel supported. They need to know that if they're going to put their hand up and seek help, that it's not going to affect their career. They're not going to be taken any less seriously. They're not going to have their abilities questioned. Because it's a hard thing to lose something you've done for so long. I lost a lot of identity, a lot of purpose. I don't blame the police for that necessarily. It's just when I separated from the police, I lost a lot of what was me. I think talking about it, the more you talk about it, the easier it becomes, and then that removes some of that stigma that's still there.
Justyn, as part of this process, and it may have even been a process for you which helped you work through all of this, you actually wrote a book which was published just I think a month or two ago, May this year. Can you tell us a little bit about the book, what it's called, and what you set out to do by writing about this?
Yeah, the book is published through Big Sky Publishing. It's called Hidden Scars from Crime Scene to Crisis, The Price of Service. The idea basically came from my psychologist, and I didn't intend to write a book initially. We were working through some incidents and some traumas at the time, and she said to me, why don't you start writing about some of these things as a form of therapy? It's well known as a form of therapy, journaling and writing about stuff, and I really enjoyed it. I found it really cathartic, and I've always enjoyed writing. And so I had a collection of small stories and different incidents and things together, and as I was going along, I remembered some funny stories, and I thought, okay, I'll write that down. And I really only set out to have a collection of events that I could hand to my kids when they're older and say, hey, this is what Dad did. Because my kids don't have a lot of memory of me being a policeman, but I hand to them and say, oh, this is what Dad did, when he was a policeman. And it grew into a book, into a manuscript. And I thought, well, I'll get it edited and make it as polished as it can be. And then, I don't know, one day I just thought, you know what, maybe I'll give it a run and see if it gets picked up. So I started sending it off to publishing houses, and it got picked up.
You've already had some folks reaching out as a result of perhaps reading the book. So that must be extremely rewarding for you.
Oh, it is. It's huge. I appreciate it. Yeah, I get messages and emails and things through the website or through my social media channels. It's incredible. I've even heard from some police who are currently serving and some who are at the academy. They're students and they've got my book. They found it in the police store at the academy. It was for sale and bought it, and they're reading it. And I'm thinking that's amazing opportunity for me to have a voice and to be heard by these kids who are going through what I did. They're the next generation of police. I really hope they get something out of it. I'm humbled beyond words that they would read my story. Yeah.
Also, I think indicative of how far the department's come forward, that they would actually put this book on the shelves where it could be accessed by those young recruits. Because not that long ago, I don't think a book such as yours would have been put in the academy there.
Yeah, I was shocked when I heard, and and I was sent a photo of it there, and I thought, wow, it's actually there. So, look, it's actually a really positive thing, as you say. It fills me with a little bit of hope.
Justyn, I just want to thank you so very much for being so open, so frank, so cordial in our discussions here. I want to thank you for your 25 years of selfless service to the good people of New South Wales, general duties, highway patrol, Pol Air. You lost a fair bit of skin along the way, mate, and to come in here today and have a chat to us about it. I want to thank you for the time that you put into the book Hidden Scars. I've read it myself, and I know it will be of real benefit to many, particularly, like you've just said, some of these young folks coming into the job to have a greater awareness. I want to thank you for your advice that you've given to other serving officers and to their families. Justyn, it's been wonderful to meet you, and thank you so very much for taking the time to come into the studio.
Thanks so much, Brent. It's been a pleasure. Really enjoyed it.
Our guest this week was Justyn Backhouse. His book, Hidden Scars, From Crime Scenes to Crisis, The Price of Service, is available via justynbackhouse.com. And that's Justyn with a Y. Join us next week for another episode of Crime Insiders Forensics. I'm Brent Sanders, with sound design by Niall Fernandez. This series was recorded and produced on Gadigal land.